Why is it that every empire, no matter how brilliant, wealthy, or visionary, eventually pushes too far? Why does expansion turn into obsession and success becomes self-destruction? From Rome to the Mongols, from Napoleon to the British Empire, from the Soviet Union to the modern superpowers of today, the pattern repeats with mathematical precision. It's as if empires follow a script they can't escape, a tragic destiny written into the human mind. But what if this isn't just about politics or geography? What if the real reason empires overreach lies deep inside us, in the same instincts that drive individuals to chase more than they can hold? Today, we explore the flaw that every empire repeats, and what it reveals about the human condition itself. 1. The seduction of success. History rarely shows us the moment an empire truly begins to decline, because decline doesn't begin with weakness, it begins with strength. A civilization rises, discovers its power, shapes its identity, builds its systems, and finds a rhythm that works. Stability becomes prosperity. Prosperity becomes confidence. Confidence becomes ambition, and ambition becomes hunger. Rome didn't begin with overreach. It began with protection, consolidation, smart alliances, careful expansions. But success changes a nation's psychology. The Senate started asking, if we can take Sicily, why not Spain? If we can defeat Carthage, why not Greece? If we can rule the Mediterranean, why not the world? The same logic guided the Mongols. Genghis Khan didn't intend to conquer the world. He aimed to unite the steppe. But once victory became normal, expansion became addictive. Success is never satisfied. Every empire learns the same seductive lesson. If we could do this, imagine what else we can do. And at that moment, the seed of overreach is planted. 2. The momentum. Paradox. Empires begin to assume that momentum is permanent. If growth happened yesterday, it must happen tomorrow. This is the same psychology that fuels financial bubbles, political crusades, and even personal burnout. A system in motion wants to stay in motion. But growth is not free. Expansion has a cost. The Mongols learned this when their empire became too large to manage. Too many roads, too many frontiers, too many local rulers, too many cultures they didn't fully understand. Their speed, the very thing that made them unstoppable, became impossible to sustain. Napoleon felt the same momentum trap. He had conquered Austria, Prussia, Italy, and much of Europe with shocking speed. Momentum convinced him that Russia would fall just as easily. But momentum is a liar. It promises infinite victories, until the first defeat shatters the illusion. Every empire learns. It's easier to grow than to hold what you've grown. 3. The cost of managing everything. As empires expand, something strange happens. They don't become stronger, they become thinner. Look at the map of the British Empire. It seemed enormous, unstoppable, the empire on which the sun never sets. But an empire that spans the world is an empire that must defend the world. Every port, every colony, every sea lane, every border. The very size that made it impressive also made it unmanageable. When pressure came, wars, revolutions, economic changes, the empire couldn't respond everywhere at once. And when the center weakens, the edges are the first to break. Imperial overreach isn't just a military issue. It's administrative, economic, cultural, logistical, and psychological. When a society is stretched too thin, decline becomes an equation, not an accident. 4. The power illusion. But beneath strategy and geography is something deeper, a flaw in human psychology. Empires overreach for the same reason people do. We mistake past success for invincibility. The Romans believed their system was eternal. The Chinese dynasties believed heaven mandated their rule. The Ottomans believed God guaranteed their expansion. The Soviets believed ideology made collapse impossible. The Americans believed global dominance would last without cost. Every civilization, at its height, believes it has transcended the fate of others. But as the philosopher Ibn Khaldun observed in the 14th century, the past resembles the future more than one drop of water resembles another. No empire escapes the cycle, because no empire escapes human nature. 5. The inner rot, when ambition becomes identity. The most dangerous moment in any empire is when expansion becomes a moral duty, when the identity of the state fuses with the need to grow. Think of the Spanish Empire after discovering the New World. Think of the French Revolution turning into endless revolutionary wars. Think of Imperial Japan believing Asia was destined to fall under its leadership. Think of the Soviets feeling obligated to spread communism everywhere. Expansion stops being strategic. It becomes ideological, emotional, existential. If we stop expanding, who are we? And so empires push further, past reason, past stability, past their own limits. Overreach becomes destiny. 6. Crisis of scale, when complexity outruns capacity. Every empire eventually hits a point where the system becomes more complex than the society can manage. This is where overreach turns into collapse. Historian Joseph Tainter calls it the problem of diminishing returns. Complex societies require increasingly complex solutions, which require increasingly complex resources. Eventually, the cost of running the system becomes greater than the benefit of the system. This is why the Roman Empire couldn't survive despite vast resources. This is why the Soviet Union collapsed despite enormous military power. This is why every global empire eventually falls. Complexity outpaces capacity. Overreach isn't a choice, it's a tipping point. 7. The final trigger, a shock. The empire cannot absorb. Empires don't collapse instantly. They fracture when a shock arrives at the worst possible moment. A devastating war, a financial crisis, a plague, a rebellion, a charismatic rival, a technological shift they failed to anticipate. Rome did not fall because of one invasion. It fell because it could no longer adapt. The Ottomans did not fall because of one battle. They fell because their systems were centuries behind. The British did not fall because of one war, but because the world moved faster than they could manage. Overreach creates fragility. When the shock comes, the empire breaks. So here is the real question. Why does every civilization keep making the same mistake? If history teaches the pattern so clearly, why don't empires stop? Why don't leaders notice the warning signs? Why doesn't ambition slow down? Why don't societies protect themselves from their own success? Why do we repeat a flaw we already understand? Why do we overreach even when we know the ending? The truth is uncomfortable, but powerful. Empires fall for the same reason people overcommit, overwork, overspend, overpromise, and overestimate themselves. Because the flaw is not political, it is human. We want more because more feels like safety. We grow because growth feels like progress. We expand because stopping feels like decline. We chase the horizon because turning back feels like failure. Empires are not abstract machines. They are reflections of human psychology, scaled to millions. What destroys empires is what destroys individuals. The addiction to progress, the illusion of control, the fear of stagnation, the belief that success means invincibility, the refusal to set limits. The deepest lesson is this: overreach is not a political error, it is a spiritual one. The Stoics warned against it, the Buddhists warned against it, the Greeks warned against it. Even the earliest Mesopotamian myths warned against it. Hubris, the desire to exceed our natural limits, always calls down its own consequences. So the question is not just, why do empires overreach? The real question is, where in our own lives are we doing the same? Are we chasing goals without asking why? Expanding our responsibilities until we break? pursuing success until it turns into burnout, mistaking achievement for identity. If history teaches anything, it is this: strength becomes weakness the moment it ignores its limits. Ambition becomes danger the moment it stops questioning itself. Expansion becomes collapse the moment it outruns wisdom. Empires fall, but individuals can choose differently. We can learn from the ruins of nations, and the ruins within ourselves. Because when we recognize the point where growth becomes instability, where ambition becomes excess, where confidence becomes arrogance, we can do what empires never did. We can stop. We can reflect. We can choose balance. History repeats itself, not because it must, but because we refuse to listen. And perhaps that is the final lesson. Empires overreach because humans do. If we change the human pattern, we change the future of civilization. If this journey made you think, give it a like, share it with someone who asks big questions, and subscribe to Timeless Questions channel, where philosophy meets history and the search for truth never ends.